Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great evening so far. Tonight we're going to be checking out Plugin Alliance's new plugin, the Oven, which is a software emulation of a hardware unit developed by Mayor Applebaum and Chris Henderson of hendyamps. If you haven't been on the stream before, you haven't checked this out before, so the whole point of the stream is it's a real-time discovery process for me with you. I've never tried out the plugin before. I don't know what it sounds like. So yeah, we're going to be just figuring this thing out together as I go and seeing what I like and what I don't like and just trying it out on some stereo mixes. We got a range of mixes, a bunch of different sources, and we'll see how that works there. The hardware unit is developed with hendyamps. Hendyamps is a pretty boutique, high-end gear manufacturer. I have had the opportunity to try out their Michelangelo EQ, and it's pretty serious. It sounds pretty great. And Mayor Applebaum, he's a renowned mastering engineer. He's been on my radar for a minute now, and seems to be doing lots of cool stuff, making lots of cool gear. And so this is neat. This looks like a really fun tool. I really like plugins that are built for creativity, not just for the technical aspect. And I think this really kind of suits this just from looking at it. I really like plugins that kind of get out of the, just the technical aspect, and where, you can see here, it's called the Oven. We've got Temp, Cook, Burners, Sizzle, Flow. There's nothing in here about dBs or ratio or frequency or anything like that. It's really gotten away from that. It's a vibe box, and that's what it's described as. Technically it's described on the Hendy website. The Oven's described as a stereo tube solid state multiband saturation unit. So that's technically what this thing does. The manual from Brainworx and Plugin Alliance, it says that it's a vibe and mojo box, and that's what it seems like to me. It just seems like it's here for fun. It looks like a fun plugin to use. It's something that kind of just encourages you to push knobs, flick switches until it sounds the way you want it to sound, which is great, because I feel like with EQs and compressors, or just kind of our standard, engineering tools, we can really get caught up in the technical. You can get caught up in the, I'm adding 5 dBs of 100 hertz here. That seems like too much. I shouldn't be able to do that. Whereas this, we don't really know what it's doing. We're gonna have a look at the manual and see, because this is a detailed plugin, but this thing just encourages you to play, and I really like plugins that do that. So what do we know about Mayor Applebaum? Well, we know he's a renowned mastering engineer who's developing some really cool tools, and Chris Henderson at hendyamps developed some pretty major boutique hardware, EQs, compressors, distortion boxes, microphones. I think I saw microphones on there. Whole bunch of tools. So that's pretty cool. And Brainworx and Plugin Alliance, they do a phenomenal job of emulating hardware equipment in the digital domain. I think they do a fantastic job of that. And not only do they do a great job of emulating hardware, they really take the digital workflow into account. And I really appreciate that about them. I think if you've seen any of my other reviews on Brainworx stuff, I've done a few of them now, they really take into mind the digital workflow and include some aspects that aren't available on the hardware and that you can't do in the analog domain. So that's really cool. I appreciate that. So seems like a pretty great relationship. Mayor, Chris Henderson, hendyamps, and Brainworx Plugin Alliance. I'm gonna guess this thing sounds pretty great for everybody to be behind it. We are gonna look at the manual before we play with this thing, because it is a bit detailed. It's not your usual plugin. We don't technically know what it's doing, and that's cool. I really like that. It does almost seem a bit too complicated in my opinion, but I haven't played with it yet at all. So there's a lot of switches, there's a lot of knobs, and we don't know intuitively what any of them do. So we can kind of guess based on the adjectives that are used to describe it, but we don't technically know what any of it does. But before we dig into the manual, I kind of have my own checklist for plugins. So this whole stream started because I love trying out software. I love trying out new technology and seeing what it does and seeing how it sounds. I'm constantly A/Bing things, shooting stuff out against other plugins, and I'm really all about the digital workflow, and I want to be pushing on that limits all the time. So this whole stream started because I love software. I love trying it out. And I've developed a bit of a checklist of things that I look at before I even hit play on the plugin and see what it does. And we're just going to go through that real quick right now. First thing I look at is the GUI, the user interface. Does this thing look good? And it looks pretty slick. I mean, the hardware looks slick. All the hendyamps stuff looks really slick. This thing looks really clean, really easily laid out, and it looks inspiring to use. And I want that out of tools. I want tools to be inspiring to use. I don't want it to just look functional. I want it to be fashionable as well. I know that doesn't matter if it doesn't sound good, but we do eat with our eyes. And this thing looks great. Immediately inspired to use it. It looks really clean and kind of minimalistic, which is a vibe of mine. So yeah, looks great. And can we resize it? Well, I know a lot about Brainworx plugins, so some of this stuff is going to be pretty intuitive to me, but immediately we can resize this thing, so it's great. There's a whole bunch of features on this plugin that we're probably not going to go over just because they're very standard on Plugin Alliance plugins, and I will be sure to point those things out, but there's going to be some things here that we don't go over in detail because they are very standard Plugin Alliance Brainworx things. GUI looks great. It's resizable. That's a check mark. Oversampling. It looks like there's a bit of oversampling happening, which I would really expect from kind of a saturation distortion unit. You're going to want some oversampling to kind of push past the Nyquist theorem and give us a little bit more headroom in the digital domain so that distortion could go a little bit further into this frequency spectrum and not run into any sort of frequency camping or aliasing, which is great. We've got 48 samples happening down here, so nothing crazy. And you don't really usually get the option with Brainworx and Plugin Alliance stuff to switch oversample on and off. It's kind of default, and it's always generally quite low. Great features always on Plugin Alliance stuff, A, B, C, D. We don't just have an AB, we have an A, B, C, D, so we can do multiple comparisons. That's great. We have an undo and a redo. Phenomenal. Love that stuff. That should be on every plugin. Plugin Alliance has it on every plugin. They're great. Mix knob. We've got a parallel mix knob here, so we can make this thing wet dry. We can use it in parallel. That should also be on every plugin. Meters. We have an input and an output meter here. I really wish they were side by side so that we didn't have to look over here and look over there to kind of get a visual estimate as to what our level is. I find that really helpful on plugins, be able to quickly kind of gain match with your eyes and not just your ears. It really helps you speed up, and these meters look a little small and a little far apart to me, but not the end of the world. So those are kind of the key things that I go through to make sure that the plugin's kind of living in my workflow wheelhouse. Plugin Alliance stuff really lives in my workflow wheelhouse because it's set up to be really functional for the DAW. So I love that. Other features that are always on Plugin Alliance stuff that we're not going to go over. There's generally an input knob up here. There's a solo mid, a solo side, and then this is a pop out for all of the extra features. So this is what the actual hardware unit looks like. And this is all the additional digital features that you get from Plugin Alliance. So that's great. Their TMT modeling, I think, is really cool. Definitely worth checking out. If you've not checked any of it out before, please just go do a bit of a deep dive, hit the old Google search and see what it does. Mono maker, stereo width, and an output knob. All that kind of stuff is great. And the manual's right here. The manuals are always really easily accessible and handy, and I'm a manual nerd. I love them. And Brainworx does a great job of like putting some extra tips and tricks, or at least they used to. I don't really feel that they're doing that anymore, but they used to put little like how they use the plugin or what Dirk, the owner of Brainworx, does and with the plugin and some of his thoughts, and I kind of miss that. Gives it a little bit more of a personal touch. We are going to head into the manual here really quickly before we start off. Usually I just kind of hit play and I go and see what I can do, but this isn't your typical plugin. This is using terminology that I mean, we do use these adjectives when we're talking about creating sounds, whether you're in production or you're in mix or you're in mastering. You talk about sizzle, you talk about cooking it up, you talk about turning up the heat on things. So we use these adjectives, but this is obviously very specific to what they're doing. And we should really know, I think, before we dive in. So yeah, the manual, vibes and mojo in a box. So that's what they're after. They're after feel, which is great. I think a lot more plugins need to kind of focus on feel and less on the technical aspect of it. So our features, Headroom Knob. Headroom adjusts input gain and compensates output gain to give you more or less headroom depending on the level and dynamic of your input signal. Okay, so we have an immediate gain staging option. We can push it more or less into the unit right off the hop and not change our output gain, which is great. It's compensating for us. That's awesome. I kind of wish they would list right here what our nominal working signal should be. Most plugins do work at minus 18 dBFS. That's their kind of nominal working level, but I would love to know. So I wish they would put here, like, ideally hit the unit at this, so that we know that we're hitting the unit at the level that it was intended or designed. Calibration knob, adjust the gain of the unit at its default setting depending on the amount of saturation you want as a starting point. So more gain staging options, which is cool. We can push the unit or back off the unit, which is great. Temperature knob. Temp control knob alters the drive circuit, allowing you to push the tube and solid state sections for extra saturation. Okay. Temperature range. This switch allows you to choose between driving it low or high, thus increasing the intensity of the temp knob range if needed. Okay, so more gain staging. So you can really dial in how you want to push this thing right off before you kind of even get into it, which is great. The cook control is golden, very, very bold with an exclamation. It allows the user to drive the pentode tube stage for an overall thick saturation that will enhance literally anything that runs through it. It can feel bigger without adding much level, thus staying in the same zone. I don't know why that's different there, but warmer and rounder with rich harmonics that are easy on the ears and create a sense of fullness with not much effort. Okay, bake and broil. The bake and broil switch the user to change the voicing of the tube and how it responds to transients. Okay, in bake it will operate with full dynamic response, whereas in broil it will naturally compress the signal and increase the saturation complexity. Okay, that's where you can make it hi-fi, mojo-fi, and anything in between to be vibe-fi. Okay, hi-fi, mojo-fi, vibe-fi. Super technical terms, which are great. Super fun. I like this. Electric and gas switch allows the user to increase the push of the cook control. Electric will be more subtle and clearer sound, and gas will be presenting a more bold, thicker, and harder treatment option. In this case, intensity is not a dirty word. Burners. This is where I'm guessing we're getting into, well, I know I already looked at this, what am I saying, I'm guessing, but this is where we're getting into kind of the multi-band things. The low burn, mid burn, top burn controls, as we call them, the burners, give the user the ability to drive certain bands for more saturation when desired. Each band operates in a way that engages the entire circuit as a whole processor in order to give an incredible diversity of options and tone enhancing saturation. This maximizes the versatility of the unit in a way that is quite rare. You can boost and cut the saturation and tonal shaping in creative ways, like using big brush strokes in a painting. Okay, so some multi-band coloring. Low burn increases or decreases the amount of low frequency saturation. Low burn type modifies the frequency band affected by the burner. Mid burn increases, decreases the amount of mid frequency saturation. Mid burn type, it's frequency selection. Top burner, more the same, increases, decreases the amount of high frequency saturation. Modifies the frequency band affected by the top burner. Bunsen. So this looks like it lives after it. The Bunsen switch alters the top burner control so that it provides more range to work with. That provides the user 4 different tonal options on the top burner. The area where it's very important to get the right harmonics to make the track get its presence in the mix and master. Okay, sizzle. The sizzle control, the name says it all. This one only goes up, not in flames. It's a boost only, and you get 2 modes for it, higher and more, where that came from. Okay, sizzle type modifies the frequency band affected by the sizzle control. Okay, and then flow. The flow knob is what regulates the amount of signal coming from the first tonal shaping section into the last gain stage. So more gain staging at the end, which is great. As such, it operates as 2 functions, each useful in its own right. The first is obvious, as it acts as an output attenuator. In value 10 is non-attenuated, and as the numbers go down, there is more attenuation applied. The second function is more interesting and subtle, for it can control the saturation on harmonics of the overall sound of the unit. So when at full value 10, the harmonics and saturation curve will be maximized on the second stage, the output stage. Thus the sound will be very rich and full with lots of energy and depth, and it can even distort at some settings based on the temp, cook, and burner knob settings, including the input gain in the chain. In the case that it distorts, you can lower it towards 10 towards 9, which will be rich and full but have less push, okay? Or to 8, which will lower more but still get a very rich and full sound and tonal. The tonal structure will subtly change as you change the flow knob down, as well as it is not an invisible gain change. The once it is below 7, the tonal shift is minimized. Okay, that's pretty complicated. So we'll see what it does. But obviously the flow is affecting the gain staging of the unit and is going to change the sound a little bit. So kind of interesting. Then we also have clean output gain here too. So that's pretty cool. You can mess around with this and then you can attenuate whether or not you want to even further, which is awesome. So this thing is involved. It's definitely involved. It's cool. I like the fact that instantly I like the fact that it's a creative tool and it's meant to be creative and have fun with and push it and play it around with it. Just from reading the manual and looking at it, it does seem pretty involved. It almost seems a bit too complicated, but that's without having played with it at all yet. So we're going to see what this thing does and see how it sounds. I like that it's super, lots of gain staging options, which is awesome. That's what you want with a saturation unit. You want lots of different ways of hitting it to develop lots of different sounds. Pretty interesting, the amount of detail that's gone into it. So let's try it out. Let's get cooking. So first thing I always check is this thing doing anything right off the hop? Doesn't seem to be. I mean, we can hear a little bit of this TMT stuff, so maybe we'll just pop it into digital. I don't really hear much of a change, so I appreciate that. And I think maybe because Mayor is a mastering engineer, he appreciates that as well. That maybe the unit doesn't do anything until you start pushing it. Maybe there's something subtly happening there, a little bit of subtle saturation, but nothing crazy. It's not really changing. It's not changing level or dramatically affecting the sound, and I really appreciate that. Okay. So we're just going to work through this thing left to right and turn every knob and flick every switch and see what happens. So we're going to work as quickly as we can and see what happens here, because there's quite a bit to try. Okay, here we go. So less headroom, we're hitting the unit harder, and instantly we're hearing some distortion. More headroom, super clean. So that's great. Just gonna turn this up a little bit here. Okay, so we can drive the unit right there. That's great. So these two in combination. Hear it pop in there, so you can hear it a bit. When we go to medium, you can really hear it pop in on the high. Get a little bit of gain. Ooh, sounds great. I know we're getting some volume there, but you can kind of hear right off the bat a bit of the richness of this thing. So pretty nice distortion, like not harsh when we're pushing it right here. So that sounds great. So lots of different things you can do right there to change the tone just with those two knobs. So that's cool. Okay, let's go over to temp. We're gonna leave this in default settings and just work through the knobs. That sounds really nice. Very smooth, rich, and clean. Sounds expensive. So we're playing with the high switch. So something I would love is if there was the option for a bit of an auto gain on the output section. Not on this flow knob, but like on the overall output. So that we were kind of living apples to apples, oranges to oranges kind of comparison style. As we're pushing the saturation, it's hard to hear what's happening while we're battling volume, right? So low switch on the temp, high. That's really hard to hear. I mean, we can hear a difference, obviously, but so let's get it so it's not clipping. Okay, well, we can't really hear the difference between the two, so let's maybe just create a bit of a gain matched setting, roughly. Wow, this thing sounds really good just with that temp knob. Okay, so on A here, we're on the high temp. B, we're on the low temp. So you can instantly hear kind of the density drop off. Back to high. Oh yeah, it's just kind of round and thick. The bottom end kind of tightens up in a really nice way. You can really hear it around the vocal too. And you can hear a little bit of distortion creeping in there on the high setting. It's a very pleasing sound. Okay. Temp is pretty cool. Let's try cookout. So we can hear a little bit of what's happening there. So it seems pretty subtle to me. The bake and broil. Broil seems a little thicker. Yeah, and bake's a little more open. You really hear it on the vocal. What does that do? Again, push the cook control. Electric will be clearer, gas will be presenting more bold. Okay. Well, let's see if we can A/B these. So yeah, gain match match would be handy for this kind of thing. I mean, I always want gain matching, so it's my own little personal wish for every plugin. So we're kind of gain matched here between electric and gas. So yeah, electric a little cleaner, gas seems a little bit thicker again. Okay. So let's just push these until we feel like we got a little bit of vibe happening. Because this seems like a box where everything's affecting everything, so. Let's play with the burners. So low burn A, B. Maybe it's just broader. B is broader than A. Maybe A seems a little more focused. B seems a bit broader. We're getting more into the low mids. Both sound really nice. Let's try the mid burn. So what does the manual say again about the burners? So it is frequency selection. B a little lower, A a little higher. Maybe that's where we are on all of these. Top burner. So top burner is the one we have lots of options. All right. Let's hit the Bunsen switch and see what happens. So the Bunsen is giving us top burn control, so it provides more range to work with. So we're just getting more range out of our boosts and our cuts, I'm guessing. Cuts. So this sounds really nice. All of these sound really nice. I mean, we're not pushing this thing into crazy territory, but all of this isn't, especially on the top end. I mean, top end harmonics are really dangerous things to push. You can really end up in a really sizzly, harsh place really quickly, and I'm not getting any of that for this, so it sounds really nice. All of it's really pleasing. Okay. Sizzle. Sizzle modifies the frequency band sizzle type. So this is just boost. Again, not over the top, pretty subtle. I mean, instantly I kind of feel like I'm thinking about some, you know, parallel EQs, things like the clairphonic, those kind of things where there's like compressed bands being added, which I know is like different from what this is trying to do. But I'm instantly waiting for my ears to go, ooh, this sounds harsh, and it doesn't sound harsh at all or fatiguing at all. It's all very expensive sounding. Yeah, we gotta try out flow. So this is gonna be hard to judge, isn't it? Because it's changing the overall gain staging of the unit as we turn it down. So we get some serious attenuation, more subtle attenuation here. So we'll do this at 10. Copy it to B, and we'll do this at 9 and try and gain match a little bit here. Pretty good gain match, I would say. So yeah, you can definitely hear that it's changing the tonality of the unit. A feels a little more compressed, a little more saturated. B's got a little bit more life to it, a little bit more bump. Let's set up one more here. So we'll go down to 8. So you can hear as I'm trying to set up this AB that we're getting into different levels of density, which makes the gain staging harder to match. Like it's harder to match these gains because different density. Okay, so full flow, full 10. Backed off to 9. To 8. Let's go to the chorus on this one. So flow at 10. Flow at 9. Flow at 8. So you can hear that this is kind of backing off overall push of the unit a little bit. Let's back off the sizzle. The sizzle is starting to get a little bit fatiguing to me. We'll just take it right out on all 3. Okay, so we'll try this again without sizzle. So this is flow at 10. Flow at 9. And flow at 8, if I could count. Yeah, so 10, you can really hear the units a little more pushed. Maybe we'll move them all to medium headroom. This thing sounds really nice. I can see why the initial reviews are really good for it. It's got a really expensive, subtle sound to it. Okay, well let's just play around with it a little bit and see what comes of it. We're gonna just zero it out. So something I'm just noticing here, which would be really cool, is that, like, if there was a band bypass on all of these burners, like. So if I could easily just push this in and out and bypass it, that'd be kind of a cool feature. Sounds nice. Alright, so some rough fun settings on the unit. In. Out. So my initial thoughts are this thing sounds phenomenal. It sounds really expensive, which it is really expensive. I mean, the hardware unit of this costs, I think, $6,600 US, I think I saw was the sticker price. So this thing is expensive, and the hardware unit, and this thing sounds expensive in here. I mean, so many saturation boxes really go from subtle to not subtle very, very, very quickly. And this seems to not be that. This seems to be really subtle everywhere. I mean, we'll try and blow it up and see what it does too. We'll try and push it to destruction and see what happens there. But I don't think that's what this is made for. This is made for amplifying the vibe of your track and the mood of your track, adding to the musicality of what's already there, rather than trying to, like, you know, distort something or grunge something up, which I'm sure it's quite capable of doing as well. Let's try it out on a few more sources. Yeah, let's try this out on some Roots rock. This is already a pretty saturated track, so this will be kind of cool to see you. With your taste still on my mouth, we're so much older than we used to be, but your eyes, they stay young. Just fattens everything up. Just that knob. But your eyes, they stay young. Wild and free. Let's let the rough side drain. Let the rough side drain. So yeah, auto gain would be awesome. Let's let the rough side drain. 'Cause I got you, babe. I got you, babe. Gain compensation between the switches would be really cool. I think that would be a really kind of handy feature, so that I could easily discern the difference between these, rather than just going, oh, this is louder, it's gotta be better. I
got you, babe. Yeah.
Whew, sounds great.
I got you, babe.
Boy, I love this mid burner.
Now I wonder
Just pushes the mix like right forward, right at you.
I want your taste big on my mouth, but I will wait as long as you need. Do my best to stay young, wild and free. Let's let the rough side.
And yeah, great that there's 3-band control over this, because this is a pretty saturated mix. These cymbals could really get away on you pretty quickly.
Dear, let's let the rough side drain. 'Cause I got you, babe.
Sizzle definitely feels like one of those knobs that you want to get it to where it feels good to you, and then probably turn it down a couple of dBs, because it feels like a candy knob.
I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
So technically we're hitting this thing hard from the looks of it. Like from the looks of it, we're hitting it pretty hard. I've got it on high calibration, high temp. But it really is nice and subtle. Just pushes everything forward, nice saturation. Let's see if we can blow it up. That's a really pleasing distortion. Like, it's even pushed like this. Let's even just crank out the top end.
I got you, babe.
And I don't know if this is because of the TMT, but we're getting like really nice different breakup between the left and the right. Let's put it into digital. No, it's just reacting differently. The more enhanced in the TMT, you can really feel the left and right movement. It's definitely a stereo. Yeah. Sounds pretty great on Destruction. It is not harsh at all. Okay, I mean, great to know, because if you want to use this for some color, imagine this would sound really great on a drum bus. Yeah, I think this would sound really great on a drum bus. Or anything you wanted to muck up. I mean, even guitar amp. Sounds awesome. Okay. Let's run around on a couple more genres with this thing. Here we go.
But I still feel alone. I guess I survived.
really love what's happening to the vocal here. On the gas and the broil. Oh, that mid band, I'm going to be using that instantly on mixes and on masters. Whole thing just comes at you. I'm a big fan of pushing 800, 600, 800 if I can get away with it in a mix and a master. I'm a big fan of pushing those frequencies. I wish I could just pop this in and out right here. I think that would be really cool if I could hear it in context and out of context really quickly, or like at 0 or whatever. And like, look, like we're really pushing this thing. And we're not really losing any dynamics. Like if you look at the signal here, we're not losing any dynamics on this thing. Get a little more control, but not a ton. Just makes it sound more epic and just fatter, fuller, closer. Maybe we're getting a little bit of gain there. Okay. Let's try it on some pop country. I mean, I don't know if I would ever use this thing on low. Yeah, that broil seems to have a really nice effect on vocals, at least for my taste anyways. Just kind of adds like a nice thickness to them. Okay. And this thing sounds great, doesn't it? It just feels, adds like an instant like polish. Fatness to everything. Sounds great. I know we're not gain match there, but so as I'm playing with this thing here, immediately it feels really like as I've understood what this is all doing, it feels really in kind of intuitive as you start playing with it. So I set off the hop that it maybe seemed a little bit convoluted or maybe a bit busy because you got so many different options. But as I've just been playing with it here, it seems really quite easy to work through and to just kind of play with. And that's the whole point of this plugin, I think, is to encourage you to play with it. So I'm just noticing that as I was hitting it. It feels really intuitive to use once you kind of get a grasp as to what everything's doing. Let's try it out on one more genre here. Sounds great. This thing sounds really great. One more. Bake on the vocals. What it's doing in that. This gets a little too thick for this track. On the vocal, I kind of like what it's doing to the bottom end, but oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I do like Broil. No, I think it's a little too thick. best sounding mid bands I've heard anywhere on anything.
Sell out for free. What you write in the caption and brace yourself for the backspin. Sell out for free. Sell out for free. Sell out for free. What you write in the caption and brace yourself for the backspin. Sell out for free. Sell out for free. Sell out for free. What you write in the caption and brace yourself for the backspin. Sell out for free. Sell out for free. Sell out for free.
Okay.
What you write in the caption and brace yourself for the backspin. Sell out for free.
Yeah.
Sell out for free. Sell out for free. What you write in the caption and brace yourself for the.
All right. Well, let's recap. This thing sounds amazing. That's my initial and final impression. I think this thing sounded great from the minute I started turning knobs. So yeah, this thing sounds awesome. That's the short answer. So yeah, Brainworx Plugin Alliance emulation of the oven from Mayor Applebaum and Chris Henderson at hendyamps. Sounds sublime. This is a beautiful sounding plugin and a bit of a flavor I haven't heard in the digital domain. I mean, there's lots of flavors out there that I haven't heard, but from what I've experimented with, this has got a really expensive musical sound. It sounds really tasteful, lots of different tonality options. Yeah, expensive, that's the word I want to use. Subtle, but not subtle. Like, it's really subtle. You can tell this is developed from a mastering kind of perspective, but you could use this. You could use this everywhere. You could use this mixing, mastering, production. No problem. Sounds great everywhere. It's just got a classy sound, musical, vibey, like everything that they've used to describe it, vibey, mojo. It's all of those things, but it's an expensive vibey and expensive mojo. It sounds really great. It does seem convoluted off the rip. Like, I felt like, ooh, there's a lot of knobs and switches here. Like, especially when we're using like fun adjectives or different adjectives for describing music. It didn't feel overly intuitive when I initially opened it up. But after reading the manual and immediately as you start playing around with it, it feels super fun and super easy to use and just inspires you to listen and use your ears, because it isn't using technical terminology that gets you thought up. Oh, well, I'm using a 4:1 ratio and blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that. It's just like, oh, do I want more or less of this? High or low? Baker Broil. It is a super fun plugin to use, and we tried it out on what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tracks, and it sounded great on all of them, and the diversity of it really became handy because you could really quickly get a sound happening and that was specific to that song. All the gain staging options are really great in it, but yeah, super fun to use, super easy to use, sounds great. Even when we threw it into full-blown distortion, it sounded really like expensive, classy distortion, not harsh at all. Nothing on this thing sounds harsh. It's a really beautiful sounding plugin. This thing will be living on mixes and masters instantly for me. That mid band, that mid burner is outstanding. It sounds incredible. I'm going to be using it everywhere immediately. I mean, I'm going to be using this thing immediately everywhere. I can see why the guys I work with have been raving about it. Things that I think this thing could use, or some of the features that I noticed that maybe I would like to see, or some spots that maybe would be really helpful for this thing that I would like to see is maybe a feature set. And none of this is a criticism of how this thing sounds. This thing sounds great. I have no complaints about the sonics or any of it. It sounds phenomenal. So anything that I've got here on my little list that I made while we were playing around with it is purely functional and workflow based. So, and pretty minor at that. The first thing I wrote down, and the thing that I would love immediately, is the option of an auto gain on the output so that I'm not constantly having to gain match. I know auto gain's hard to do in saturation with saturation plugins and the volume that they create because perceived volume, but even if it was just an approximation or just got me roughly in the ballpark quick enough that I was able to play with it a little bit easier. So an auto gain on there would be amazing. That'd be a feature I would really like to see. I'd love to see gain matching between these switches, the high-low, bake, broil, electric, and gas. I think that would be great. And I also think some gain matching here on the calibration mode would be really useful, really awesome to have. So again, you can really start judging the sonics of the thing rather than having to constantly move your brain to, oh, am I gain matched? Is this just louder? Because definitely all of these things change the gain a little bit. Not so much the bake and broil, but definitely the high-low and the electric and gas and the low, mid, and high, or low, medium, and high. So gain matching between those switches would be awesome. The headroom thing's great. I would love to see bypass switches or like a way to click things in and out. Not so much on this temp and cook stuff. I didn't really feel the need for it there, but on the burners, on the EQ section, I really wanted the ability to pop it in and out. So a bypass switch on each of the burners would be really cool so that I could like set it and then like, do I like that? Do I not like it? I find it really unintuitive that this low burn type, the switch is way off the low burn and the mid burn type is pretty much under the low burn. And I don't understand why those are not underneath the actual frequencies that they're switching. I think that would feel really intuitive. I felt a little lost there for a minute when I was switching the mid band and I think I was turning the low burn. I'm like, what's happening here? So a little bit confusing. Yeah, those are really my only feature requests. I mean, Brainworx just does a great job, as I've said at the beginning, of really kind of accommodating the digital workflow already. They really put a lot of thought into their plugins and give you digital only features. All this stuff down here in this lower rack unit is all digital only features. Doesn't exist on the hardware. So they already really take care of that, all the AB, undo, input. They really do a great job looking after their users. I mean, Plugin Alliance and Brainworx, and they're just constantly getting better and better and better, all their plugins. I mean, their plugins have always sounded good, but you can see that they're just constantly improving and you can hear it. You can hear that they're constantly improving in their plugins. This thing sounds incredible. I highly recommend trying it out, whatever you're doing. It's a really subtle and sublime tool, but really powerful at the same time, and can really add a lot to whatever you're doing. Yeah. Way to go, Brainworx. Way to go, Plugin Alliance, and way to go, Mayor, Applebaum, and Chris Henderson at hendyamps. This thing's a home run for sure. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for hanging in there with me and trying this out with me. I always appreciate it. And if you're catching this on YouTube and you don't mind dropping me a like, a subscribe, and turn your notifications on there as well, that would be amazing. That would really help me out. I'd be super appreciate that. The oven, total home run. I'm well impressed. So great job, everybody involved with that. So look forward to playing with this some more. Anyways, yeah, that's going to do it for me. I hope you have a great night. Thank you.